In a small town on the edge of the woods, there stood a house no one dared enter. It was an old, crumbling Victorian, its windows boarded up and its door sealed shut. Locals called it the Whispering House, though no one could remember exactly why. One evening, a young couple, Leah and Mark, moved into town. They had heard the stories, of course, but dismissed them as superstition. They were looking for a quiet life, far away from the noise of the city. So when they found a cottage just down the road from the old house, they saw no reason not to make it their home. From the first night, things felt off. At first it was just little things, flickers of light in the distance, strange sounds in the night that Mark brushed off as animals or the wind. But then one evening, as Leah was sitting in the kitchen, she heard something soft, almost inaudible, like a whisper. She froze, her heart racing. It was coming from the direction of the old house. "Mark," she whispered, turning to him. "Do you hear that?" Mark, sitting on the couch, nodded slowly. "Yeah, it sounds like someone talking." Leah's stomach twisted. The house had been abandoned for decades, but the voices, they weren't normal. That night, as they lay in bed, the whispers grew louder. It was a cacophony of indistinct murmurs, like a crowd of people arguing in the next room. Leah covered her ears, but they were still there, growing clearer with every passing second. She could make out fragments now, words like "come closer," "help us," and "don't leave." Suddenly, the sound stopped. Mark turned to her, his eyes wide. "We need to check it out," he said, almost urgently. Leah hesitated, but the curiosity gnawed at her. Together, they stepped into the night, walking towards the decrepit house. The air around it was thick, heavy and oppressive, as though the very ground was holding its breath. They reached the front porch, and for a moment the whispers seemed to grow louder until it felt like they were inside their heads. The door, though sealed for years, creaked open with a single push. The interior was dark, but Leah could make out the faintest glow from the cracked walls. It was as though the house was alive, breathing, pulsing with energy. They ventured deeper into the house, their footsteps muffled by the thick layers of dust. And then Leah froze. There, in the far corner of the room, was a figure, standing still, facing away from them. "Who's there?" Mark called out, his voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It didn't move, but as they approached, Leah felt something cold brush against her neck. A chill ran down her spine as the figure turned around slowly. It was a woman, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through them. Her mouth opened and the whispers came pouring out, but this time they were no longer fragmented. "Help us," the woman whispered. "You shouldn't have come. The house, it wants you." Mark backed away, but the air seemed to thicken, pressing in on them. The woman's mouth stretched wide, impossibly wide, until it was a gaping void, swallowing everything in its path. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar as Leah and Mark tried to run. They never made it out. The next morning the house stood as it always had, silent and still. But in the nearby woods the townspeople could hear something, a faint whisper like the wind, but not quite, a voice calling to them. "Come closer." I hope that gave you a bit of a chill.